Good evening, Who Dat Nation, and happy Wednesday to our Bayou Blitz family. Happy preseason Wednesday. We actually have a football game to talk about and another game to preview. The games might not count, but that doesn't mean that we can't get something from it ourselves, just like the coaches and players do. I am Bob Rose. I am one of your co-hosts to your Bayou Blitz podcast. I hope everybody is doing well this evening. And joining me, as always, is my friend, my colleague, my partner, Brendan Boylan. Brendan, I see the familiar sights of a hotel room. I'm a little jealous, depending on where you're calling us from tonight.
Yeah, I'm in Columbus, Ohio.
Okay, I'm not as jealous.
Yeah, I'm not super far from you. I guess I'm closer than normal.
About 2.5 hours from me, yeah.
Yeah, it's the better way to say it. So I'm okay. Like you said, I'm coming from a hotel room again. But what's new? The world tour must continue, as they say. We got some football to talk about. Alan Ulrich is behind the scenes. He'll be joining us here in a moment. But real quick, Bob, before we got super started, before we bring Alan in, we have some footballs to give away. So I wanted to go ahead and pick some winners of the contest. For those of you who missed out on the contest, White Panel Saints football. Bob has his as well. So the Facebook winner will be getting one from Bob Rose. The Twitter winner will be getting one from me. We're going to sign them, write a little message saying thanks for your support. And then hopefully, if the winner's in New Orleans, you guys can shoot us a photo of you guys getting it signed at training camp. If you're able to go, I think that would be really cool. Or you can save it for next year or whatever you guys really want to do with it. So let's go ahead and pick our winners. I'm going to use my trusty cell phone. And we're going to go on Facebook first. Bob will be going to who? Cue music. I don't, I didn't have any Price is Right or Jeopardy music in the background for this, so I apologize.
Well, we can't afford the licensing rights anyway, so it's good.
That is true. That is true. So our winner from Facebook is Jason Warfield. Jason Warfield will be winning the football from Bob. Jason is a founding member of the Bayou Blitz Facebook page.
Yes.
Bob, if you will message Jason after the show is over, if he's not watching, you are the winner. Just send Bob some information where to ship the football. Bob, you can write whatever message you would like. You could.
Yeah, and Jason's been a long-time supporter of our work at the Saints News Network. Congratulations, Jason, right on cue. Jason's been very active, not only in the Bayou Blitz group, but on my personal page and several Saints Facebook groups as well. Thank you for your support, Jason. The football coming from us is the least we could do. Honestly, guys, we really do wish we could give all of you a true gift rather than the gift of these faces every day, these faces and these brains. But I think Brendan said it before. We're gonna try to put together a couple of gifts, couple of giveaways during the course of the season too, of varying degrees. Look, it's the least we could do for the support that you guys have given us so far.
Well, and how about this? Jason says he'll post a picture from week 2 Monday Night Football in Charlotte. How about this? I'm just throwing it out there. We can work out the details. I'm in Charlotte. Bob is going to be in Charlotte. Jason's going to be in Charlotte. How about we all get together? We give him the football. We can both sign it in front of him. And we can all get together in Charlotte to give you the football in person, take a cool photo, and all that good stuff. So we'll work out the details, Jason, but I think that would be really cool.
Yeah, I'd love that. Like Brendan said, I will be in Charlotte to cover the game for the Saints News Network. Brendan and I have already met in person, but we're looking forward to it. My wife Lauren is coming down. We'll be meeting up with Brendan and his fiancee Katie. And who knows what other recluses from the Saints News Network are going to be pulled out of the woodwork too. So I think it's going to be a Who Dat invasion in Charlotte, North Carolina on Monday the 18th.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And our Twitter winner getting the football from me is going to be Libby on Twitter. Libby, I will send you a direct message. You will be getting the football from me in the mail, unless you are also coming to Charlotte for Monday Night Football. If that's the case, we can do all the football giveaways then. But Libby, we will be in touch. Thank you guys for participating. This is the second giveaway. First time we gave away a Drew Brees Funko. We're happy to give these footballs away. This time, Bob and I have had a lot of conversations about potentially getting some hats and T-shirts made. So I'm sure that's probably going to be the next giveaway. And then Jason even just throws out where he's going to be sitting at the game in the comments. So, Jason, just message Bob on Facebook or vice versa. We'll get it all worked out. We'll see you in Charlotte in about a month. That's crazy. In about a month.
And Libby, thank you for your support as well. You also have been a loyal fan from the very beginning.
Long time on Twitter. Yep.
Extremely engaging on all of our pieces on the Saints News Network and all of our personal pages. So Libby, I'm so happy for you too. And listen, if you want the football signed by both Brendan and I, let us know. It'll be a little bit of a delay getting to you, so I don't know if it would come in time for you to take it to Saints training camp. But if you want it signed by both of us, let us know. Or like Jason, if you're going to be in Charlotte, let's all get together then too.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll work out all the details, but enough about giveaways. We will have more. I promise you guys can get in on some more. But like Bob said, we actually have a football game to talk about. We have a football game to preview. And with all that, we are going to be bringing in a familiar face, a friend of the show, a guy who does a show Tuesday nights. If you guys are unfamiliar, I'd be shocked, but Under the Dome host Alan Ulrich. Alan, we saw you, Bob must have seen you yesterday. I saw you the week before. No, Bob.
Alan was in the dark yesterday. Nobody saw Alan last night.
Oh, man.
Hang on. I was muted. Sorry. We haven't had rain here in about 6 weeks. It rained for the first time last night, and that was just way too much for my power grid to handle. And we lost power, I want to say, about 6 o'clock. And I didn't get it until about 10 o'clock last night. So, yeah, it was a dark, dreary night.
Well, at least you're joining us tonight, and thank you for taking some time. At least you and your wife, Debbie, got to enjoy, maybe a pre-birthday evening together, and happy birthday, Debbie, again, if you're tuning in. So I hope you guys had a quiet night without the show.
Yeah, it was fun. It was just warm. It was warm. So, but thank y'all for having me on the show. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Oh, listen, it's been too long since I think it's been since the draft, since the three of us got together, if I'm not mistaken. And Brendan fills in for me on your show every now and then. As Sean Williams always used to call the Bayou Blitz, we're your little brother's show. The Bayou Blitz kind of stemmed from you guys helping me out, and of course Kyle T. Mosley getting it kick-started. So yeah, we're at the very least we're cousins for life.
Absolutely. I look at y'all as equals, definitely not little brother, little sister. That's for sure.
No redheaded stepchild. Good to know.
Absolutely not.
Well, let's talk about some football. New Orleans Saints, first week of the preseason. They take on the Kansas City Chiefs inside the Superdome and come away victorious. Now, obviously, the final score of these games doesn't really matter. At this point in the process, you're really just trying to get as much game tape as you can on a lot of these guys, because you can go through practice all you want. And guys can look great in practice and then not show up on the field on Sundays, Mondays, Tuesdays, whatever day of the week it is. I mean, how many stories have we heard about guys being phenomenal practice players and then they forget how to catch a football during the games?
Emmanuel Butler.
Whoa, Rob, I didn't ask for names. If anything, you should have thrown my name out there from my playing days back in middle school and high school. Nonetheless, there were some Saints that definitely stood out in this game. There were some starters that stood out in this contest. So I guess first and foremost, Alan, will ask you this. Your overall first impressions, obviously the first time we've seen this team on the field in the Derek Carr regime, Derek Carr era, if you will. And we got to see some pieces on defense that we wouldn't typically see because of injuries. So what was your overall takeaways from preseason week 1?
I thought that opening drive was probably one of the best Saints drives since 2020. Coming out on the field, one of the things I wanted to see in this preseason game was, how does this team look when they come out of the huddle? Do they look like, does Carr look like he's got a good command of the offense? Are they crisp? Are they lined up properly? Are they executing well? They did all of those things. The plays, they're all going to be vanilla plays. You can't really grade what kind of play calling improvement has Pete Carmichael made this year. You can't look at that. You just want to see, is he out there executing? Does he look comfortable running this offense? Does he look confused? And none of that happened. I mean, they were just out there, boom, 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 marching right down the field. No negative plays. And they get a touchdown in the opening drive. Back in, I want to say 2014 maybe, we went like 3 preseason games before the first team offense scored a touchdown.
Yeah.
And here we are, first possession, first preseason game, boom, you get a touchdown. That's what really, really impressed me. And then if you look at some of the other guys later on, players like A.T. Perry having a good game, although he has to hold on to that ball better when he tries to break the plane. But A.T. Perry having a good game. Jake Haener not having a great game, but when you look at other rookie quarterbacks the Saints have had, they've always had trouble with the verbiage. They have trouble organizing the guys on the field, and there was only a few really hiccups and things. I thought he showed a lot of mature command out there once he got comfortable, but it just took him a little while to get comfortable. So those are the kind, and then of course the defense. I thought the defense, the guys that we were used to seeing play well. Pete Warner had a great series when he was out there. Lattimore, Adebo. I thought they all played extremely well. I liked what I saw out of Nathan Shepard. I liked what I saw out of Saunders. Even Brzee looked. He didn't look lost. At one point, he did all 3 of his moves. He did a spin move, he did a rip, and he did. I think he did a bull rush all in one move. So he didn't look lost. He didn't look overwhelmed out there. So that was what was good. When you ask me the bad stuff, I have a list of some bad things I saw too. But I want to focus on the positive right now.
Bob, what about you when it comes to some of the positives? What were some of your positive takeaways from preseason week 1?
I'm with Alan. With the first and really second team units too. I look for crisp play. I look for tempo and rhythm from the offense. I look for aggressiveness, and staying, not getting beat out of position, defensively. And the Saints checked off all of those boxes. Not only the first team offense, and like you said, Alan, you couldn't ask for a better drive, from Derek Carr and the players that were in the lineup. Even the first team offensive line, they got some traction in the run game. They provided exemplary pass protection. And you could tell Carr was comfortable going through his progressions. Same thing with Jameis Winston and company when Winston came in. Winston, we saw him hold on to the ball too long a couple of times. That's what you get with Jameis Winston. But other than that, he looked extremely comfortable as well. A.T. Perry, you can't say enough about him. Granted, a lot of people are going to look at the statistics and say, that was in garbage time against, third and fourth teamers. No, I mean, those 6 receptions and all those 70 yards came in the first half, against, first team Chiefs defense for a little bit, but against mostly the second team defense. So A.T. Perry, I thought, got his career off to a resounding start. Let's see if he could keep up that momentum to kind of secure a roster spot. Defensively, when you hold Kansas City, and I realized Mahomes played one series, Travis Kelce didn't play at all, and they were without some other pieces, just like the Saints were. But you held the Chiefs to just 31 yards and 1 first down in their first 3 drives. I call that exactly what you want from the Saints defense. Like Alan said, you got strong play from Lattimore, Adebo. Taylor gave up a couple plays in the slot, but I thought he recovered well. We even saw a couple nice rushes from Peyton Turner. Alan, other than myself, you're the only other one who I have heard this week sing the praises of a completely revamped defensive tackle position. Saunders, Shepard, and Brissy, we all saw plays from them. We all saw some interior push in the pass pocket, and stonewalling. That 4th and short play. I know Werner cleaned it up, but they were the ones who made that play, and that's not something that we saw from the Saints often in short yardage last year. Hugo Amagi, please. I was thinking he'd be lucky to make this team as a special teamer, but not only for his play against the Chiefs, but also in practice, he looks like a real gamer back there. He looks almost like a younger version of Tyrann Mathieu, and I make that comparison because he's undersized, but he has tenacious pursuit of the ball, and he has terrific range and anticipation. I'm not saying Hugo is going to make this team, but again, just like with A.T. Perry on the offensive side, he probably has some work to do still, but he's definitely trending in the right direction. So, I'm not ready to crown this team as Super Bowl champs yet, but I saw a lot of things that I like from both sides of the line of scrimmage, against a very good Kansas City team.
Well, you just brought up a couple guys that impressed you, and if you guys are reading the bottom of the screen, or if you guys saw the thumbnail image as you came into YouTube, we wanted to talk about guys whose stocks rose and some guys whose stock fell. And there's a lot you could say about a preseason week 1 game. I want to say this first and foremost. You can't God, Bob, how many times have we said it? You can't overreact to things like this. But when we talk about guys' stock rising and falling, just because their stock rose this past week does not mean they're going to make the team. Just because their stock fell this week doesn't mean they're going to get cut. But certainly your performance in game is one of the biggest factors in helping you get a roster spot. So, Bob and Alan, we can kind of go in order. If you wanted to pick one guy that really improved their stock because of their week 1 performance against Kansas City, who is it? And we'll start with our guest, Alan.
I'd say A.T. Perry would be my first choice, because I think most of us felt like he's competing for that 5th, maybe 6th wide receiver spot. Probably is going to be more of a practice squad guy. I don't think he'll make the practice squad now. They just released the Steelers receiver to make room for Darnell Williams, who they've just added. But they just released a receiver. They released a receiver about a week ago to make room for Jalen Smith, the linebacker. So that receiver room is getting whittled down. And I think if A.T. Perry has another good game this week against the Chargers, and he's going to have to play in that 3rd preseason game, if he has another good game versus the Texans, I think he makes a really good push, not only to be the final 6, but also to possibly be a guy who's not going to be inactive on game day. Mm-hmm. So, I think he's probably making the biggest leap forward because of the injuries to Rashid Shaheed and the injuries, as usual, to Traquan Smith. I think he is having a good shot of pushing Byron Edwards for that 5th slot. I hate saying this, but I think Traquan is pretty much going to make this team, just because we really do not see any other receiver rising to the top other than Perry. So, you're looking at 5th, 6th guy. One of you or both of you are going to be inactive on game day. But still, I think he's making that push to get into that final grouping and would be the first guy they're going to put in or activate if Traquan is injured yet again during the regular season. So that's probably my biggest one. The safety you mentioned, Bob, I like him a lot too, but he's got a much deeper position that he's trying to climb to the top of. So that's my choice.
Yeah, he does. Amadi does. Again, I think he's trending in the right direction, but he's got some work to do. And listen, Perry, I agree with you. Perry is the easy choice here. But you guys know I've been in love with him since before the draft. I'm going to go on the defensive side of the ball as far as a guy that helped himself the most, and that's the linebacker, Nefi Sewell. Sewell got the start for a banged up Demario Davis, who, guys, Demario probably would have played it had this game counted, but there's no reason to have Double D out there right now. Nefi has been making some noise on that depth chart all training camp, especially in pass coverage. Now, we're talking about a converted collegiate safety here. He started his college career at Nevada as a safety, transferred to Utah, and eventually converted to linebacker. He has got terrific football IQ. As you'd expect from a safety, he works very well in space. He seemed to have a good grasp of the Saints defense. He spent most of the year last year on the team's practice squad, and looks like he's making a strong push for a roster spot. Now, obviously, Davis, Warner, those guys are safe. You would think that Jalen Smith, probably would have to play himself off of a roster spot. And DeMarco Jackson is trending in the right direction too. So, Nefi is in a crowded spot to make one of the last roster spots, for the Saints at linebacker. But the fact that he gets the start against the defending Super Bowl champions in the preseason opener, I think tells you that the Saints coaches already have a certain level of confidence in him. He played up to that level of confidence, against Kansas City. And, again, he has some work to do. By no means has he secured a roster spot, but I think he's the player that helped himself the most, especially defensively.
I think for me, you could go a couple different ways with this. And I think one of the easiest things, maybe overlooked conversations you could have in terms of guys that help their stock, because you wouldn't think this way in terms of he's got to do anything to make the roster. But I look at a guy like Jameis Winston. Now, hear me out. How did he help his stock? What have Bob and I talked about all offseason? And while I think the odds of it happening now are a lot slimmer than they once were, I think Jameis proved he could still be a quality quarterback in this league. And there were some questions and coming off injury and what happened at the end of last year. I think he helped his stock if the Saints were looking to potentially move him because of how well he performed and how in control he looked of the roster. I'm going to go receiver, though. You guys know Keith Kirkwood is one of my guys. We're from the same hometown in New Jersey. He's had a really good camp. And while I still don't think he's going to crack the roster, I think the fact that he's helping his stock continue to be a part of that conversation for New Orleans and sticking around, whether it's on a practice squad or whether at what Alan said earlier, maybe he does squeak in at the back end of the roster. He's just a weekly inactive or a guy that is only a special teamer. Remember, the Saints lost a key piece of their special teams unit this offseason with Dwayne Washington, who just signed with Denver. And that was a guy that had a roster spot every single year simply because he was a key special teams guy. So there are going to be some special teams positions available. It's kind of weird and difficult to say when you are showing flashes at wide receiver that you should be on special teams moving forward. But there are going to be opportunities for guys like Keith Kirkwood, who may be fighting for that final roster spot in their position. But if they could show some flashes on special teams, I think that's a way to look at it as well. I do want to address this before we go on to some guys who hurt their stock. And this is going a little further back. Where is DJ's comment? DJ asked what we thought about Jake Haener. I think Alan gave a pretty good answer in terms of, the Saints quarterbacks over the years that they've brought in. You could look at guys like Ian Book is a good example. But the Saints typically bring in one quarterback, it seems like, every year. to at least compete in the preseason, potentially be a look at, quarterback 3 or your training camp quarterback, your scout team quarterback. And Haener didn't look as lost. I know obviously the Sean Payton offense over the years is one of the more difficult to grasp at a young age for a quarterback. But Haener didn't look completely lost. He had some moments. He had some moments, if you guys get what I'm saying as well. However, ultimately, this is a guy that the Saints are really high on. At least what we're hearing from, internally from New Orleans Saints camp. Bob, what were your thoughts on Jake Haener? And ultimately, this is a super overreaction question, but ultimately, do you think this is a guy that could potentially be an NFL starter at some point in his career based off the little that you've seen so far of his college career and training camp and now first preseason game?
I'll go backwards to front. I like Jake Haener coming into the draft, and it was definitely in support of the draft selection in the first place, because I loved his tape. I loved his game at Fresno State. He has a lot of Drew Brees / Derek Carr type of qualities in him. I'm not by any stretch comparing him to either one of those guys because he's still got a ton to prove. But you could see what the Saints like about him. His command of the offense. He's kind of a field general. He's athletic enough to move around and make plays in the pocket. He's patient enough to go through his progressions, and his arm strength is just good enough to make all the NFL throws. Now, what I saw on Sunday was a guy that had the yips a little bit, early on. He looked like he needed to settle himself down. But I'll give him credit. He did. And I'll also throw out the disclaimer for both him and Jameis Winston. Those guys had zero pass protection in front of them. And I know we're going to trash on the backup offensive lineman in a minute, but you have to factor that into the equation when you're evaluating these guys, not only Winston and Haener, but Jamal Williams, Ellis Merriweather, and the other backs that are going to get a shot this week if they get any blocking in front of them. Now, having said that, I thought Jake regrouped very, very well late in the game. Let's not forget that the Saints were behind by 2 scores late in this football game. And, granted, it's against a lot of guys that will not make an NFL roster. Mm-hmm. But the Saints had a lot of guys that won't make an NFL roster, too. And Haener, regrouped himself, put together a nice drive to get the Saints within 1 point because of that missed 2-point conversion. And then was able to finish off the drive after the defense got that turnover late in the game for the game winner.
Alan, any other thoughts when it comes to Jake Haener before we continue on to some guys that hurt their stock after week 1 of the preseason?
Yeah, I'm going to echo a lot of stuff that Bob said. Yeah, I think Haener has potential to be a starter, but this is something that's going to be a work in progress. We're talking 2-3 years down the road. We're not talking about somebody who they had some people questioning whether or not Haener could be the backup quarterback this year and they could ship off Jameis for players or draft picks. That's not going to happen. Haener has a lot of growing up to do. I mean, he looks very small out there. I'll be completely honest. He looks small. I think he needs at least an off season of Saints conditioning workout. You're not going to get any taller, but I think he needs to get a little thicker, honestly.
Well, and Alan, and I'm sorry to interrupt. Alan, you said about this about Drew Brees many, many times. That Drew Brees was short for an NFL quarterback, but by no means was he small or slight.
No.
Drew had a build on him. He didn't necessarily have that coming out of Purdue. I mean, he took a beating in college, and Drew bulked himself up to take that NFL punishment. Just as you're alluding to what Haener has to do, and it'll probably take another full off season for him to do that.
And I've said that about the number 1 overall pick over there in Carolina. From Alabama, Young has got very, very small shoulders for an NFL quarterback. And I think he has a very small torso, too. And, your shoulders aren't going to get any bigger, but you need to bulk up to be able to take the impact of these large players that are hitting you. So, I think Haener needs that. I think he needs a little more maturity as far as raising his football IQ. All that said, I think he executed the offense far better than an Ian Book or a Sean Canfield or almost any other rookie quarterback we've ever brought in here. Even the guy whose lifestyle I would love to have been able to emulate, Chase Daniel, who has gone from team to team to team, made a ton of money, never really been a starter, but he's even shown a better grasp of the offense than Chase Daniel. So I like that about him. I think he's a winner. I think he's a player who is willing to put in the work to become an NFL quarterback, but he's not there yet. So,
well, let's move on and talk about some guys that hurt their stock, especially after week one. And again, this is something that people can go back and say, "Oh, it's an overreaction. It's just 1 week." But for a lot of these guys, yes, mini camp's important. Yes, training camp is important. But this is really your opportunity to showcase what you can do for a team. So, for me, I want to go back to a comment I saw while you guys were chatting and talking about Jake Haener. And here it is, talking about a guy that might have negatively affected his stock. Bob, this is a guy you really liked coming out of college, and Isaiah Foskey. But keeping it real, Who Dat Sports Podcast says after rewatching the game, Foskey looked unsure of himself. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
Yeah, absolutely. Jordy Hultberg and I talked about this yesterday afternoon too. Isaiah Foskey, he looked like a guy that was paralyzed with fear, or probably more accurately paralyzed with analysis. He was playing patty cake with the Chiefs offensive lineman. And I saw Foskey get steamrolled twice. And that happens because he didn't have a good enough base. His footwork wasn't right. The coaches need to get inside of Foskey's head now, or probably more accurately, a guy like Cam Jordan or Demario Davis kind of pulling this kid aside and saying, look, you're not going to get cut. So if that's the question, no, Isaiah Foskey's a second-round pick. He's not going anywhere. So maybe one of these leaders need to pull Isaiah aside and say, you're not going to get cut. What we need from you is to just turn it loose and barrel ass after the quarterback. We've all seen the Bill Cowher, Greg Lloyd intro on NFL Films, where Cowher has to reach up because Lloyd's a big man. Cowher gets in his face, probably spit flying all over poor Greg Lloyd's face, and says, just get after the quarterback. That's all I want you to do. Well, these guys need to go out, sit down with Isaiah Foskey and say, don't worry about any fancy moves. Just get into that backfield. So, yeah, I saw a lot of patty cake with the Chiefs offensive lineman. And, I think Isaiah come around. I love the draft pick. I love the player himself coming out of Notre Dame. He looks like a guy that needs to get out of his own head right now.
Yeah, Night Will. I agree with that. And the reality is, for the learning curve for defensive ends is often at least a year, if not 2 years for them, and especially for a guy who's a second-round pick. People, beat up the Saints all the time about Trey Hendrickson. Trey Hendrickson did not come around to be the pass-rushing force that he is until his fourth season. It took him 3 years, and there were a lot of times where he was a healthy scratch. Just because he, just like Foskey, was paralysis by analysis. I was thinking instead of reacting. So I'm not going to beat him up too much. He didn't have a good game. He's a second-round pick. There was a challenge that people talked about coming into the draft he was going to have to make the next level. But the size is there, the tools are there. He's just got to quit thinking, and he has to react. And once he does that, I think that's when you'll see the speed and the skill and the instincts all come into play. Right now, he's thinking, and when you're thinking and your head's down on a swivel, those guys are just teeing off on you. And that's what happened to him. a guy I thought that hurt his stock, although he's having a good camp. But there's a battle for that number 2 cornerback position. I thought Alontae Taylor kind of took a step back.
Mm-hmm.
He recovered nicely, but he gave up 2 big plays early in the game in the first half. And I thought that, Adebo is having a good, solid camp. He looks like he's got a good, firm hold on the number 2 spot. They're trying him out, Taylor, they're trying him out in the nickel back position. But, if he wants to be that starter outside of Lattimore, he's got to step it up. He's got to break up some plays. Now, he did have a role in the interception.
Mm-hmm.
He did reach out and bat that ball away. But I would like to see him make a couple picks in the preseason while he's out there. I know it's easier said than done, but I'd like for him to attack the ball and at least try and make the interceptions on these plays. Don't let guys get behind you. The touchdown, he and I think it was Roby, they looked like they had a breakdown in communication, so the guy ended up wide open in the end zone. I think those things hurt him, but I think they're all coachable mistakes. They're things that you can work with him, just like Foskey, and he will get better at, and he's having a good camp. So I know he's going to improve, but I think it kind of hurt him competing for that number 2 spot outside of Lattimore.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And and again, the errors that you pointed out with Alontae Taylor, most of those occurred in the slot, a position that he is relatively new to. So we're going to see some growing pains there, but we also need to see more big plays from him. The guys that I think, I'll cheat a little bit. I'll go, one offense, one defense, real quick. The guys that I think hurt their stock the most on defense, I think it was Jonathan Abram. We talk about Amadi making plays at safety.
Mm-hmm.
Jordan Howden has been getting first team reps, at safety. We're pretty sure that Lonnie Johnson has a fit in the coach's mind that they want to use him in that PJ Williams type of role. Well, you're running out of roster spots here, at safety, and Abram is a former first round pick. I've compared him to Malcolm Jenkins and the way that his style of play. And the reason that I did that, Malcolm Jenkins is a guy that you never wanted in man-to-man coverage. You never wanted in a single high safety role because his range and his speed just isn't good enough. But put him down in the box, and Malcolm Jenkins was a playmaker. Put him in a physical role on an opposing bigger tight end, Malcolm Jenkins could make plays. That's what I need to see from Jonathan Abram, and we're not seeing it. He's getting the opportunities, but he's not making anything out of it. And then on the offensive side, I'll go with a guy who hurt himself by not playing, and that's Kirk Merritt. And Merritt has an opportunity here. I know he's converting from wide receiver to running back. And they just signed Darrell Williams. Well, folks, one of the reasons why they felt they had to sign Darrell Williams and look into signing, try to sign Kareem Hunt, was because they were worried about backfield depth. Now Merritt maybe could make a mark as a kick returner, but we saw Lynn Bowden make some plays there. They signed the former LSU kid, John Trey Kirkland, he got a couple opportunities. The less Kirk Merritt is out there, and I know he's dealing with a hamstring problem, but the less Kirk Merritt is out there, the less opportunities he has. He's in a position where he has to turn coaches' heads. He has to play his way onto a roster spot, like some of these other guys that we mentioned in the previous segment, and he's just not been out there to do that. I feel bad for him because I like Kirk, but he's got an uphill climb, and you can't climb with a bad hammy.
He's one of my wife's former students, so it's really hard for me to root against him because Kurt's a Destrehan kid, local kid. I hope he makes the team, but yeah, he is taking a step back, and Merriweather took advantage of it, and Merriweather had a good game. I think Merriweather still has a struggle to make this roster. They brought Williams in because they're looking at, Kamara's out for 3 games. Now Miller's got a knee sprain. We need a veteran back anyway. So that just makes it that much harder because you're going, okay, do I trust the rookie? Do I trust the veteran guy? I'm going to go with the veteran guy. But, yeah, I think Merriweather and Merritt both are competing for the same roster spot.
Yeah.
And bouncing off that idea, I'll cheat a little bit when it comes to my guy who hurt his stock. And again, I'll reiterate this. I said it at the beginning. Just because we're talking about guys whose stock was hurt does not mean they're getting cut.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like we talked about Foskey. Foskey's not getting cut. He's a second-round pick. So kind of piggybacking off of that and piggybacking off what Alan said, the guy that I think hurt his stock the most is Kendre Miller, a third-round pick who's going to make the team. And is it his fault? No. But injuries are a part of the game. And the negative thing that's going on with Kendre Miller is he was injured going into the draft process, didn't play the national championship game, picked up a knock in mini camp, missed time, and now has picked up a knock in training camp, missed a little bit of time, and now has picked up a knock in preseason game number 1. And though he's day-to-day, will miss some time.
Mm-hmm.
It's never good when you have a running back that you selected that high who is already going through the injury reoccurring. I don't want to call it an injury bug because it seems like this injury bug has certainly bit him a few times. Mm-hmm. It's like the nasty mosquitoes that won't go away while it's really humid out, right? So he's got the injury mosquito biting him all over the place. But you don't want that type of reputation as a young running back, that you're going to be an injury-prone kind of a guy. And then to that point, because of the injury and some uncertainty about the position with Kamara's suspension and whatnot, the Saints go out and they sign a running back in Williams, who one former LSU guy. That never happened, so celebrate it while you can, LSU Tiger fans. I know it's happened a little bit more over the last few seasons, but it never happens. You don't have Tigers on this roster, so celebrate it while you can. So they sign a local guy, an LSU Tiger. They sign a guy who is a veteran with Super Bowl champion experience. I always think that is super undervalued. And then third, they brought in a guy who does a lot of the same things Kendre Miller can. Run between the tackles. I mean, I think Williams is a proven can catch the ball out of the backfield extremely well, but there is a lot of hope that Kendre Miller can become that. They're similar in size. They can run between the tackles with, force. They can both get out in open space. They're extremely agile. They can make people miss. And like I said, Williams can catch the football. So if you're Kendre Miller, you're looking at that, okay, great. I get another veteran. I can pick his brain. It's another great guy to have in your running back room, in your positional room. So you're going to have a Jamal Williams who led the league in touchdowns last year. You're going to have an Alvin Kamara who's been a Pro Bowler multiple times and an Offensive Rookie of the Year. You're going to have a Williams who has won a Super Bowl and has been a contributing factor in a, running back by committee that has found success as an individual and has found success at the team level. Okay, that's all great if you're a rookie running back. You're super excited to be able to pick those guys' brains until you realize every single one of them is ahead of you on the depth chart because you can't stay healthy and you're unproven. So I really think Miller's reoccurring injury history at this point, though it's a very, 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 very young NFL career so far for him, he really hurt himself. Very literally and figuratively. He hurt himself on Sunday. So I want to kind of fast forward a little bit as we have about 10 minutes left before we get to 10 o'clock this evening on time. We've done a lot of kind of recapping and talking about week one. I want to look ahead to week two for the New Orleans Saints in the preseason. Who's a guy that you specifically have your eyes on, Alan? This is a little different this year because you only have one round of cuts opposed to multiple ones where we would really be focusing on guys who maybe at this time last year. But who's a guy that you're going to be highlighting, circling their name, and really trying to see the impact they have in week two because they are fighting for a position?
Well, they're not fighting for a position so much as I'm curious to see what Jalen Smith and Darnell Williams are going to do for the Saints. To kind of dovetail what you just were talking about with Miller, has an opportunity, which he's unfortunately looks like he's going to miss. We know Kamara's going to be out 3 games. We know they're not going to give Jamal Williams the ball 25, 30 times a game. They want to have multiple backs in there. So you're going to miss an opportunity. So I want to see, is Williams going to be the guy now? And if he is, how long does he stick around? Because if he looks like some of the guys that Sean Payton has brought in for suspensions, and I'm thinking about some of those New England running backs that they brought in, C.J. Spiller, those kind of guys, veteran backs they brought in, they were all busts. Even Adrian Peterson, to an extent, was a bust as far as bringing it back. So I want to see if this guy can actually become part of the rotation, be more of a Latavius Murray as opposed to a Adrian Peterson. And the same with Jalen Smith. I want to see what he has left. He was a Pro Bowl linebacker. We know we have problems at linebacker. Demario Davis is not going to play. I like Sewell. I like DeMarco Jackson, but they need a veteran out there. And I want to see what he has left in the tank, or has the injuries robbed him of his speed? Because both of those signings, when you bring a guy in at this point of camp, you don't necessarily expect them to contribute very much. They probably are more camp bodies than anything else. But these are guys we're going to have to depend on, especially in the early part of the season. I want to see how these guys play versus the Chargers in these practices, and then in the game itself on Sunday.
Yeah, as far as individual players go, other than the obvious guys, from the first team, offense and defense, and other names that we've mentioned tonight, I think all eyes should be on Jalen Smith and Darrell Williams to see how they perform. And they'll have opportunities. They'll have 3 days of work against the Chargers, a Chargers team that was a playoff team last year. As far as me, I'm going to go whole unit. We've all three teased it, jabbed at them a little bit, but the second team offensive line, they were beyond abysmal, last week. And you're not talking about undrafted rookies here, guys. You're talking about veteran starters. Storm Norton has been a starter. Max Garcia has been a starter. Calvin Throckmorton has been a starter. Trevor Penning was the only guy that leaked into, they let him play a little bit later, with the second, unit for extra reps, which I like that move. I want to see it again. I want to see how Penning individually performs against Bosa and Khalil Mack, in the scrimmages, by the way. But Garcia, Lewis Kidd, Mark Evans, who is an undrafted rookie, Throck, Nick Saldiveri, all those guys, we feel, a lot of us should feel anyway, that the Saints starting offensive 5 up front, that's still one of the better units in the league. The issue is health, and has been for the last 2 or 3 years. And I don't think you could look across the NFL and point to a team that had their starting 5 intact all year long. So you're going to need these backups to step up. Hopefully you only need 1 or 2 of them for a limited time. But be that as it may, you need to have guys that you can depend on going into your second unit up front. Otherwise, it doesn't matter who you have at running back, quarterback, wide receiver. You're not going to get shit done. So I need to see something from this second team offensive line. Anything.
I agree.
I think for me,
totally agree with those guys.
I think for me, when I look at these positions and I look at guys that are competing for roster spots, yeah, it's easy to highlight linebacker. And Jalen Smith's going to be a really interesting piece to the puzzle. He's an interesting acquisition just because what you mentioned, Alan, is what does he have left? Is the speed completely gone because of the injuries? And it's really easy to go all the way back to his final moments with the Fighting Irish, right? Because that went from a guy who was going to be a potential top 5, top 10 pick that slips all the way to the second round because of a nerve injury. And then that kind of started and snowballed the process of guys sitting out bowl games that weren't the national championship. So Jalen Smith had a lot to do with the course of college football changing, which is a whole different topic. But I am interested. Bob and I have been harping on, as you have as well, Alan, all offseason. The Saints need to bring in a linebacker, a veteran linebacker. They need to do it. They need to do it. They need to do it. They finally did it. That's an easy position to look at. Receiver's an easy position to look at. We talked about guys that certainly helped their stock earlier today, and a guy like A.T. Perry. I think you could easily pick a guy like that, highlight them, and say that's the guy I want to watch. For me, it's still going to be the interior of the defensive line. I know I'm probably cheating a little bit because I said that last week as well, but there are legitimately 3 new pieces to that. And I want to see improvements week in and week out. And I want to see that group of 3 be able to rotationally be moved around and play in, with each other, and play in different pairings, essentially, because that's what's made the Saints defense so special over the years, especially on the defensive line. The fact that they've had 7 to 8 guys that can rotate in and be productive. And obviously that was not there for New Orleans last year. And we said it. Obviously, the front office agreed with what we were saying because they just tore it apart and decided to bring in new guys. So I want to see some unique pairings with the 2 free agents, obviously the first-round pick, and just see how those guys work. Because if the Saints cannot get back to a point where that is a fully functional, rotational defensive line that can bring pressure up the middle and stop the run, no matter the pairing of the 4 up front, the Saints aren't going to be successful. I know it might be a little bit of an overreaction to start talking about that in preseason, but this is where it starts, and that's where you need to start seeing the progress. So that's the position I'm going to highlight for New Orleans in week 2 of the preseason for sure. Just a few minutes left here on the show. Guys, I wanted to talk about one final point, if you wanted to keep it, just to a short few moments of your time and your thoughts. With there only being one roster cut this year, opposed to the multiple that we'd seen over the years, how do you think that changes how the New Orleans Saints coaching staff selects who's going to play when? Are we going to see starters play more time in each contest, or do you still think it's going to be, we'll call it the traditional way, where by the time you get to that last preseason game, you're really just seeing guys that are going to be competing for final roster spots? Alan, we'll start with you.
I think this second preseason game, you're going to probably see the starters play into the second quarter. Depending on how many snaps they get. It's a snap count. It's not really a quarter-driven thing. But I think the third preseason game is very much still, let's just see everybody that is on the bubble out there playing. Jake Hayner and Jameis Winston will be the only quarterbacks out there that game, because not only will the Saints scouts be watching and the coaches watching that game, they're going to be breaking down film on these other games because the other teams do the same thing. And they're showcasing the players that they're going to release, players that plan on putting in a practice squad, and the Saints are going to be looking at guys that will probably get cut to fill in, maybe backfill at linebacker, maybe backfill at offensive line, maybe even backfill at fullback. If Williams doesn't pan out as a running back position, that's the bottom half of your roster. That's always fluid. That's the guys we're looking at. So that's how I look at this. You're going to see the scrimmage helps out a lot, so they don't need to see the starters out there quite as long as you would typically see, like say in the old 4-game format. The third preseason game, they used to play all the way to the third quarter. You won't see it like that, but I think they'll be in for more than one series. They probably will be in there at least through the first quarter into the second, because I'm looking at maybe 2.5 series on offense, just depending on how it plays out. If you don't score, obviously you're going to be out there a little bit longer, but 2 long drives, car will be done, most of those starters will be off the field.
Yeah, I agree with a
Bob?
great deal of that. And I think I think that's because we have seen a lot more in in the last year or two, of the inter squad scrimmages, and the Saints have two of them preceding their game against the Chargers, and they have two of them preceding their game next week against the Texans. Plus, don't forget, after there is only one cut down day. But after the fact, there is a full 2 weeks before you have to worry about the regular season. So, because of that, I think the coaches only had to slightly modify what their traditional preseason strategy was. You're going to see the matchups that you want to see. For example, this week, a very good Chargers wide receiver core against a very good Saints cornerback unit. The Chargers pass catching backs against the Saints linebackers. Saints offensive line, pass blocking against Khalil Mack and Bosa, and company. You're going to get to see that, and you're actually going to get to see it in situational football during the scrimmages because the coaches control what goes on. So as a result, like Alan said, you don't see these starters play, into the third quarter. You see one, maybe two. Good series, and then Carr and the rest of those guys are going to take a seat. And in preseason game number 3, you're going to see guys that are auditioning for a job, or guys that the Saints know aren't going to make their roster, but they're legitimately giving these guys a chance to audition for jobs elsewhere, or at least play their way onto the practice squad. That's I think the kind of mentality that the Saints and the other NFL coaches throughout the league, take to these preseason games now.
Well, guys, there you have it. I think we've done a pretty good job of talking about last week, previewing a little bit of the future for the New Orleans Saints as well. We thank you guys so much for joining us. Alan, where can everybody, if they don't already, follow you on the World Wide Web, and of course follow the Under the Dome podcast that airs typically on Tuesday nights when you have power, at least?
Yes, yeah. Well, my wife and I have been joking all day today about getting a generator because I want a whole house generator, but they're kind of pricey, and I'd have to wait till after hurricane season when it's cheaper to buy one. But yeah, I'm on Twitter at 79 Saints. I'm on Facebook. I'm in the Bayou Blitz. I'm in, Under the Dome podcast. I'm on New Orleans Saints groups. Most of the Saints groups I'm in under my name, Alan Ulrich. I write a good, bad, and ugly after every regular season and postseason Saints game. So that's kind of my instant thoughts after the game's over with, what I thought was good, bad, and ugly about the game. And yes, on Tuesday nights, not quite as rigid with our time as you guys are, which I really appreciate this, and I need to be a little more disciplined. Bob and I go off the rails too often on Under the Dome, but there's a lot of stuff that goes on that we just end up talking about. Yeah. But we're on every Tuesday night, 8 to 9, 8:15 to 9:15, somewhere around there. Ish. That's mostly where you find me. So I really appreciate you all giving me the opportunity to talk, to be on the show and talk about the Saints with you guys. Love y'all's show. Somebody's asking a tough question right there. I don't know if you want to include that one or not, Brandon.
Yeah, we'll keep this one really short. No.
Yeah.
The answer is no.
Yeah.
Will not happen.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with that too. I think Gruden has kind of ruined his reputation in the league. He can come back as a consultant. He can come back as maybe even an assistant coach, somebody who has like a Bill Belichick, who would have kind of the immunity to keep Gruden down. But I think Gruden's time as a head coach is over with.
Yeah, I agree. I have nothing to expound on either one of the, short answer, no. Long answer, word for word, what Alan just said. It's not that Gruden is not a capable football mind. He is, but he's kind of a disgusting person, and not a PR nightmare. To bring in for the Saints or any other organization, outside of if you're a Bill Belichick or a Mike Tomlin or someone that would have the immunity to the PR nightmare that would be a Jon Gruden.
Well, I was going to say, too, the other thing he could do, and this is really the only situation where I think Gruden would fit in with an NFL franchise at this point, it's like when the head coach isn't fired, he's just promoted to a new role, and it's typically some like made up, front office position. Like that's what Jon Gruden could do. It's like special advisor to the head coach or something like that, or like special advisor to offensive schemes, or that's the only role, maybe not in New Orleans, but that's the only role I could ever see him being in again.
And I'll be totally honest with you. Even if Gruden had never said the things he had said, you get 2 shots to be a head coach.
Yeah.
Rarely does anyone ever get 3. And I think the second shot you get, if you don't become a winner with that franchise, like a Tony Dungy, you never get another shot again. So Gruden would have had to have won another Super Bowl for him to get a shot somewhere else, and it's just not going to happen. Bill Parcells is the only coach I can think of who's had 3 opportunities, and that's because he's Bill Parcells.
Yeah, and Bill had playoff runs, deep playoff runs wherever he went to. So there might not have been multiple Super Bowl franchise winning championships, but you knew that a Bill Parcells team was going to be a Super Bowl contender. Jon Gruden, after his run, he had his run in his first stint with the Raiders. Won a Super Bowl with Dungy's team, took Dungy's team over the top. So give him credit for that. But after that, each year those Buccaneers teams under Gruden declined. So I don't know that you could point to Bill Parcells and say Bill Parcells could build you a championship quality team or at least a playoff team. Jon Gruden, you couldn't say that about.
Right, exactly. Yeah, Marty Schottenheimer's the only other head coach I can think of. And Marty, and I'm sorry, this is the last thing I'm going to say. I know y'all want to go, but Marty Schottenheimer was my favorite coach if I had a loser franchise and I wanted to make them a winner.
Yeah.
You're not going to go to the Super Bowl with Marty, but Marty was great for building a team into a winner. Yeah. And then you go find a coach to take you over the next level.
Marty was the NBA equivalent of Mark Jackson for what he did for the Warriors. Yeah. And Steve Kerr just brought him over the top. Yeah.
Exactly. And he is one of my all-time favorite coaches, but I understand his limitations.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Bob, with all that said about Jon Gruden, didn't expect that question today.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have really avoided that whole conversation, the fact he's been in the building a little bit more than anybody expected this year. But, Bob, where can everybody follow you on the World Wide Web, the podcast, and all that good stuff?
Folks, thank you, first of all, as always, for tuning in to us tonight, and for joining. Many of the same names and faces join Alan and I on Tuesday too. So we are literally one big family. So thank you all for that. We love you for it, and you guys have taken these shows Under the Dome and Bayou Blitz and made it your own and made the brand grow. So I hope that you will continue to do so. Remember that there's an Under the Dome Facebook group. There's a Bayou Blitz Facebook group. And both Under the Dome and Bayou Blitz at Bayou Blitz Pod have their own Twitter pages too. Make those brands grow. Start to You encounter an NFL or especially a New Orleans Saints fan wondering, hey, what podcasts, what groups, can I join or listen to or be a part of? Send them your way. This is your show, so grow it. You've done a spectacular job, and you can follow me individually, Bob Rose on Facebook, at Bobby R 2613 on Twitter, and all of my work, along with John Hendricks, Ross Jackson, and Kyle Mosley, can be followed at the Saints News Network or at Saints News over on Twitter. Remember that we do the majority of the New Orleans Saints work for the SI.com team page too, so keep that in mind. Again, it's hard to avoid us.
That's always a good way to put it. We sound like the crazy ex that won't leave you alone. It's just hard to get rid of us. For
There you
myself,
go.
you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads at BT Boylan. Of course, I want to say thank you guys for everything you guys have done to grow this. We love being able to interact with you. We kind of mentioned at the beginning of the podcast or the live stream, so we'll say it here at the end. Bob and I will both be in the area for Week 2 Monday Night Football in Charlotte against the Carolina Panthers. If you guys are in town and you want to meet up with us, please DM us. I think ultimately, Bob, what might be the easiest thing for us to do is, maybe Sunday night, you and I post up at a local eatery and we just say, hey, if you guys want to swing by, Bob and I are going to be here between this time and this time. We'd be happy to see you guys. So we'll probably end up doing something like that. We'd love to see as many of you guys as possible because doing something like that is so much easier than trying to meet up at the stadium. Ultimately, Bob, I know you've tried to do it over the years with people. It is really hard to make it happen. So we'll likely just post where we're going to be Sunday night or, Monday before kickoff. And we'd love to be able to meet up with some of you guys while you guys are in town.
Yeah, and Alan, you and Debbie make the trip. We've decided that we're gonna invade Charlotte. We're all gonna invade Charlotte for that Monday night game.
I need to bring a Sam Mills jersey and put it over that statue.
Yeah.
Just as a reminder for everybody. So, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me on the show tonight. I really appreciate that.
Oh, it's our pleasure. Thank you for taking some time. And again, folks, if you haven't checked out Alan on Under the Dome, or engage with him on Facebook, he prefers Facebook over Twitter. But you will find, and I consider myself a strong NFL historian, but you will find no better historian of the New Orleans Saints or the NFL in general. When Alan and I get together, we have to stop ourselves because we'll just get carried away, and we won't be talking about today's NFL. We'll be talking about NFL history, and it's so fun to talk with this man about that.
That's because I'm old. I've seen a lot of NFL history, good and bad. So yes. I tend to be a little verbose. That's why I prefer Facebook over Twitter. I don't run out of character space.
Well, guys, we thank you so much for tuning in for yet another edition of the Bayou Blitz podcast. Bob and I will be back next Wednesday to break down Week 2 of the preseason for the New Orleans Saints as they take on the Los Angeles Chargers. Until then, hope you guys find some peace, spread love, practice positivity. We'll see you next week for another episode of the Bayou Blitz.
Thank y'all.